How is it possible for us to draw hearts like this, when hearts genuinely give off this appearance? Is it credible that King Charles ever made contact with the beating heart of a little kid who was still alive? Is it possible to live with a heart that has been manufactured via 3D printing? From the past to the present to the future, this is the strange history of the human heart. El Pindal Cave in Spain is the location where the first known portrayal of a modern-day heart symbol was produced. This depiction dates back to 15,000 BCE, which is a significant amount of time before humanity had any idea what a human heart actually looked like. This is seen in cave paintings that date back to the time of early hunter-gatherers. The images depict a woolly mammoth with the heart sign situated directly on its abdominal region. There is very little information that is actually known about these paintings, such as who actually created them and what they signify. However, there are some experts who believe that the images of creatures, such as the woolly mammoth, may have been instructions for where to strike with spears. However, it is not what you would call a romantic origin story. The Egyptians, only 12,000 years later, began to recognize the heart as the core of life and mortality. This realization came about a short time later. The Egyptians had the belief that the heart was the organ that was responsible for things like your feelings, your wisdom, and your memory. In point of fact, the Egyptians held the heart in such high regard that throughout the process of mummification, the heart was not removed from the body like other organs were. This was due to the belief that the heart was essential for survival in the afterlife. In the form of a type of judgment, the gods would take your heart, which was frequently depicted as a jar with two metal handles, and weigh it. If your heart were to be weighed against a feather, the Egyptian god Anubis would do so. You would be graced with a passage into the hereafter if they were of the same weight. Because of all the shame and wicked deeds that were weighing down your heart, you were cursed into oblivion if your heart was heavier than the feather. Therefore, you were lost forever. The expression, having a heavy heart, is also supposed to have originated from this, which is another possible interpretation. This was taken to an even higher level by the ancient Greeks. Not only did they believe that the heart was the location of a person's soul, but they also believed that the heart was a system that was operational within the human body. Hippocrates, the first known physician in history, and Aristotle, an ancient Greek scientist, both held the belief that there was a relationship between the lungs and the heart. They spent a considerable amount of time explaining the significance of the pumping activity of the heart. After conducting research on embryos of chicks rather than actual human beings, Aristotle formed these views. Although he may have been heading in the right way, he did make several mistakes in his reasoning. According to Aristotle, the heart was composed of 3 chambers. In fact, it has 4. It was his belief that the heart's primary purpose was to provide heat to the body. In light of the fact that the heart pumps blood, which does contribute to the regulation of temperature, I suppose you could say it's somewhat accurate. In addition to this, he proposed that the organ was responsible for regulating the temperature of the heart. However, that is not the case, because we have sweat glands that are responsible for that. In spite of the fact that they were not entirely accurate, the Greeks were obviously making some headway. 700 years later, on the other side of the Mediterranean, the city of Cyrene in Libya started circulating silver coins that depicted the emblem of the heart. To be more specific, was it the sign of the heart, or was it merely the leaf of the plant known as silithium? In the ancient era, silphium may be found growing naturally along the northern coast of Africa. At that time, it was regarded as a miraculous cure that could treat a wide variety of ailments. Therefore, it is possible that both of these things were true. In point of fact, it was so highly sought after that it was reported that Caesar had kept 1,500 pounds of it in the Roman treasury. In light of the fact that silphium was employed as both an aphrodisiac and a contraceptive, historians do in fact hypothesize that the heart-shaped leaves of the plant may have been the source of the heart symbol's link with love and passion. Because of its extinction, which was most likely caused by overharvesting, we will never know whether it was a panacea or merely an ancient goop. This is a really unfortunate circumstance. Move forward in time by approximately 1,000 years, and the genesis of the Holy Heart can be attributed to the rise of Christianity. This religious symbol that is associated with Jesus Christ gave rise to various graphic portrayals that began to resemble the beginnings of the anatomical form of the heart, despite the fact that it was still quite a distance away from what an actual heart looks like. The proliferation of these paintings led to their appearance in Christian monasteries located all over Europe and the Middle East. Over time, it was included into a multitude of religious writings, and continues to be utilized in the present day for ceremonial purposes. as well as in the names of a great number of educational institutions, medical facilities, and other global establishments. By the time of the Middle Ages, images of the heart in culture had expanded well beyond the boundaries of religion and were being employed in art to represent royalty around the world. The heart also made its first appearance on one of the most popular objects in the world, which is something that you might really have in your possession right now: playing cards. After being invented in Asia, playing cards eventually made their way to Europe, where various cultures experimented with different suits according to their preferences. Germans were the first to wear the heart suit, which is still worn at poker tables and around campfires today. The heart suit was first observed in the 15th century. Throughout the time that the heart was beginning to make its way into culture, genuine scientific progress had been halted for more than 1,000 years due to the persecution of religious groups that occurred throughout the Dark Ages. You see, when someone passed away in the past, you buried them and carried on with your life. The concept of dissecting a dead body or conducting an examination of a deceased person was just not common and was frequently rejected by the public. Only during the Renaissance did individuals like Leonardo da Vinci and others eventually have the courage to begin dissecting human and animal bodies for the purpose of scientific investigation. Consequently, this presented Da Vinci with the opportunity to become the first artist to sketch a heart that was a true picture of the human heart. Through his thorough approach to his job, he was able to successfully and accurately capture diagrams of the heart using nothing more than pens and paper without any further tools. Unfortunately, despite the fact that his study significantly advanced our understanding of the heart, it was not devoid of any conspiracies. Although Da Vinci never published the drawings himself, he did write in the margins of the schematics. I could tell more if I was allowed to do so. Da Vinci never even published the sketches. Unfortunately, during that historical period, religion and the harsh Spanish Inquisition were responsible for a significant amount of coercion and even silence among the scientific community. It was fortunate that the Renaissance would soon give way to the Age of Enlightenment, which would be the time when science and art would be liberated from these constraints. It is, nevertheless, impossible to avoid the question of how many more discoveries Leonardo da Vinci would have produced if he had not been afraid of being persecuted. The year was the 1600s, and a little lad named Hugh Montgomery, who was only 10 years old at the time, was riding his horse across the countryside of England. Hugh was thrown through the air by the horse, which bucked him off and tossed him into the air. He landed on a sharp rock or fence with his chest first. In this case, there are a few different stories. A gaping incision was left in the middle of Hugh's chest as a result of the accident, which was so severe that it fractured his ribs. Incredible as it may seem, young Hugh managed to survive, but not without a scar that would go on to become one of the most recognizable scars in the world. In the aftermath, he was left with a huge hole in his chest, and the beating of his heart was completely visible to the naked eye. Throughout the entirety of human history, no human being has ever had the opportunity to witness a living, beating heart. In fact, at first, they believed that they were looking at his lungs rather than his heart. But they were wrong. Hugh did not only survive, but he prospered as well. He proceeded to embark on a tour throughout Europe, gathering crowds of people who were yearning to see a real human heart for themselves. Hugh was called in for a royal examination by King Charles I, who was one of those several individuals. The monarch was captivated by the sight of the throbbing organ, and he moved closer to Hugh in order to place his eyes and his hand on it. In order to touch the heart, the king reached in and used his thumb. 3 fingers and 3 fingers. The king inquired out loud, "Does it hurt?" Hugh responded, "Not at all," to him. Through the documentation and verification of the boy's one-of-a-kind case, which was carried out by the royal physician William Harvey, the door was opened for additional research to be conducted on the cardiovascular system. Tell us about your thoughts in the comments section below, and subscribe to our channel for more.